This is Live Wild's Connection Matters podcast, bringing together heart-centred, nature-connected, curious people who share the inquiry: how can we create a connected and meaningful way of living that brings more health, happiness and growth to our world? My name is Leona Johnson and I am your host. This is episode 3. Well, hello beautiful humans, how are you today? I hope you're well. I'm really good. I've just come in from a really wet, wild, lush, vibrant, green, jungle-like walk in the woods near me with a friend. It was so lovely, so good to get out, even in the rain. I'm quite a fair weather nature connector, but decided just to get covered up and go for it, and it was well worth it. If anyone needs some inspiration to get out in the rain, I'd just get that hood up and go for it. It's so good. And I always get out and go, why do I avoid this so much? So I'm excited to be here today with you to introduce Lily Horseman. Lily Horseman is the chair of the UK Forest School Association, and she's been really instrumental in supporting the growth and rise of really good quality forest school provision in the UK. So I really wanted to bring her on to Connection Matters just to open up the conversation around forest school and nature connection. I really feel that the rise in forest schools across the UK and the world has really brought nature connection to the mainstream rhetoric. There's so much research now, there's so much out there in the news. It's happening, and that feels good to me. It feels like the change in the right direction. Children need nature connection. We all need nature connection. So Lily Horseman is one of those people that you can speak to for hours. She's really authentic and down to earth, but she's actually a real leader in her field. She runs Kindling Play and Training, and as I said before, she chairs the Forest School Association, as well as works with local communities through an organisation called Stomping Ground. So all these links will be shared in the show notes. Bear with us a little bit with the quality of the audio. It's not too bad, but there are parts that aren't quite so good, so sorry about that. If you like the show, please consider supporting it at patreon.com/Connection Matters podcast. This is where you'll find bonus episodes, giveaways and behind the scenes content from me over time. All the support we receive here really makes it possible for this to carry on, so thank you. I'm really, really, truly grateful to anyone who feels that they can support us now from the beginning, because it's really going to make a difference to how we carry on. If you haven't already done it, don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast service you use. We should be there. This way you'll get all of the episodes into your device straight away. And it's also helpful, if you can, to leave a review on iTunes. This is what affects our ratings, so if you get a chance to rate us and say what you think, then that would be really great. I think that's it for now. So this is Lily Horseman. Good morning, Lily Horseman. Thank you so much for coming to join me in this virtual space for Connection Matters podcast. I'm really glad to see your lovely face, and I've been really excited about having this conversation because it feels like, as a fellow northerner and a fellow forest school nature connection person, that there's plenty to talk about right now. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you. And I feel like we keep almost meeting as well.
Yeah.
The number of times we've been stood in a car park on our way to, like, as everybody's leaving, going, oh, hello,
Yeah.
here you are again. So it's, really nice to actually consciously make a bit of space and go, right, what's happening?
Yes.
Yeah, that feels really, really good.
Yes, definitely. And before we go on, I'd love to share, I always like to start with a bit of gratitude. I went out this morning early and I stepped outside my door, and yet again the sky was blue and crisp and so unbelievably clear. I was just absolutely taken aback, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm noticing it more right now, but it's almost like being in the mountains. I've been away in the past, and I wake up in the morning and there's this crisp, fresh, clear air that you just don't seem to get in other places. And now that we've had weeks and weeks without all the pollution and, driving, and maybe it's just the time of year, but it just really impresses on me how beautiful it is when we've got clear, clean air to breathe, and I can look out over the hills and see all these like young, fresh, vibrant, pale green leaves coming out on the trees, and it's just such a precious time of year, isn't it? So very grateful that I can appreciate that I've got the space, and that I have the practice of taking myself outside each morning with my glass of water to notice those things.
Mm. Yeah. I think similarly, that is something that has really sustained me over the last couple of months, is being able to step outside and even, noticing an ant trundling across the path and thinking, oh, I've got time to hang out with this ant for a little while. And so that, for me, just like being able to soak it all in and really, actually take that little bit of extra time, because I'm not in a rush. I don't have to be somewhere by X o'clock. That for me. So to have the time and space, actually, that is massive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Just to do whatever it is that you need in that moment as well. So that's something I'm really finding that I've got a lot of gratitude towards myself.
Yes, I'll share that with you. With that presence, that sense of just space and presence, and just being, noticing and having time to share nature is it's a very precious part of this process that we're in, this unique time in history.
Mm-hmm.
So I invited you to come and speak to us because I know that you're very involved and have been involved with Forest Schools UK, Forest School Association UK. I wonder if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do and what makes you feel alive.
So I've been a forest school practitioner for quite a while now, and also for the last 10 years or so I've been training new practitioners as well. So I spend a lot of time thinking and talking about forest school. And then when the Forest School Association formed back in 2012, I sort of became more and more involved with that, and for the last couple of years I've been the chair of the Forest School Association. So and interestingly, what makes me feel alive in that, I love championing the work that we do. And I think for people who aren't familiar with forest school or have only seen it from a distance, there's a lot of subtlety in there and nuance in there that perhaps doesn't always get seen from a distance. And it's really, and I think interestingly, when you talk about acts of connection, the way that we encourage people to connect with themselves, the other people around them, and then the place that they're in, the nature and the things that surround them, and then looking at really the outcomes and how we best facilitate that. There is a lot of subtlety and a lot of nuance in that. So for me, and being part of the Forest School Association, championing that really good quality work is really key. And I love thinking about that stuff and nerding out about it. That's the stuff that really makes me feel alive, is really trying to understand why and how and what works, and how we can really focus on that and emphasize that. That's what excites me about that sort of work.
Because we'd got into the position, hadn't we, as a nation, and I guess culturally across the world actually, where we've squeezed nature connection out of the way that we live and out of our education system, where the education system's become more and more focused on academic outcomes. And it was a few years ago, because when did I became forest school leader 8 years ago, because it was whenever just after my son was born that I did my training. But I volunteered to find out more about it just before I had children, and when I heard the word forest school leader, it just made my ears go ping, what is that? I need to know, because I was so aware, I have a social work background, and I was so aware of the disconnection that I was seeing in families and children and people generally, that I really felt I was looking out for ways of bringing more connection and finding ways that we could interact in a different way, and something that would be more systemic in its approach. And I feel like in this short time since I heard about forest schools and then have subsequently trained, obviously it's become very common in my sphere of influence, but I feel like it's actually become very much more on the mainstream agenda, and people seem to know about forest schools now. Is that what your experience is?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I used to say to people say, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I do forest school. And they go, what's that? And I say, well, I work with children in the woods. And so after a while, I just started to say, oh, I work with children in the woods, and we do sort of stuff that helps them. And now people go, oh, what, like forest school? I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, forest school. So rather than me having to explain what I mean, when I start to explain what I mean, people understand it as forest school. And that's a real shift, right? That means that for some reason, as an approach, it's hit not just a nerve like you described, but a kind of communal nerve, and that people have gone, oh, forest school, that sounds like a thing, and people have become very aware of it and know about it, and I think that's really powerful. But it also comes with a risk, as do most things in life, right? Where there's something with benefits, there's also that comes with risk, and so then people going into their yards with astroturf and some children and some bamboo canes to play with, and saying that's forest school. Does it really have that same quality of connection? And that's the question, isn't it, that we keep coming back to? Like, does it have the same way to connect with the natural environment? Does it have the same kind of deep level process and permission for children to really explore what's going on for them? And I'm not saying that you can't do all of that without that environment, but I'm looking out of my window just now at a woodland, because I know that's the thing that makes it work for me and for so many other people as well. That rich natural environment. So it's really interesting how as a culture we've caught on to something that there's been an obvious need for.
And desire, and just, I mean, it's part of we're all feeling it, aren't we? Adults and children. I think parents really want it for their children, and notice how little time we have for it in our day-to-day lives, what with fitting in all the after-school clubs and childcare and then coming home, and the draw of screen time and all of that, has minimised the amount of time and free play opportunities that children have and adults have. I keep talking about it as though it's just children that need it, but we all do. And yet, and I totally hear you about this quality thing. Where I work and where I live, there's such beautiful woodlands all around me, and so to do our sessions and workshops that we hold in those spaces is just blissful, really. It's very easy because nature does the work. Whereas I've also worked in schools where there's one tree, or there's a very manicured and boundaried area that's called the forest school area, and really we have to take all of the resources and have to take in things, and it takes a different level of skill, and it is a different thing that we're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right, because in any interaction, if you sort of imagine it like a triangle with these 3 points, so you've got the participant, the person who's there's the person who's facilitating, so like the person who's invited people into that space, and then there's the natural environment. And if one of those points is further away or diminished in some way, then something has to spread to reach that. And it may be that the participants are really skilled at finding those ways to connect in that environment, or it may be, and if not, then the practitioner has to spread to fill all of that gap that's there. And before I came to forest school, so my background's play and play work. So that's kind of the route I came through. And one of the projects I did was I used to work on housing association land. So we'd rock up, we'd have a little van or a car with some bits and bobs in, and the kids would just pile out and we'd play. And that was funded as a nature-based project. But often, like you say, there was just one tree, or there was maybe a bit of fence, or sometimes not even that. But because those children were in a place that they were in their own homes, they were in this place that they played all the time, and we were kind of there adding in extra or facilitating that in some way. Actually, those children were quite skilled at playing in that place and could find they knew where the snails lived in the fence, or they knew where the soil was looser. And so actually, as facilitators, we had to do less work to help those children connect with that place than if they were new to that place. And so I think, that dynamic shift between facilitator, participant, environment is really interesting. How you have to stretch, and like you say, sometimes you're the one just like stretching both ways to manage people who aren't very comfortable in an environment that doesn't invite in some way.
Yeah, going back to that point of how disconnected I think we become in many ways. I used to work in schools in central Manchester, Longsight and Old Trafford, and we would take children out onto the piece of grass with the few trees that there was near them, and the children would be tripping over their own feet just because there's roots on the floor or there's some sticks. And I realised it's because that mainly those children were leaving their homes in the morning, either getting in the cars and coming to school, or walking along concrete pavements, playing in concrete playgrounds, and then going back home to their hard floored, and they'd never really walked on uneven ground. And I just find I'm less shocked by it now, but at the time I was just absolutely flabbergasted, really, that there were 4 and 5 and 6 and even 7 and 8-year-olds who were so unsteady on their feet on really not very wild terrain, but they hadn't had the opportunities just to experience uneven ground and an irregular ground around them. But the beauty and the magic in that is that it really doesn't take very long to, when you're in that space, to actually open up and create the skills that are needed and support them, because it's there, isn't it? The curiosity is with the children, and as long as you can hold them in a good way so that they feel safe, they will find their ways of interacting that bring them sort of learning and excitement and the zest for life that you want to be able to see them having.
Exactly that, and everything about their physiology is set up to be walking on uneven ground, right? And to the point where actually in Japan a little while ago, I remember reading about people setting up specialist gardens with uneven surfaces so that people could go and walk in those in order to rebalance their physiology. Because if you only walk on flat ground, your back starts to hurt and your hips become disaligned and things start to not work right, because we're so well attuned to a natural environment after, because it's really only been, the last couple of 100 years that we've been sat inside, with an electric light on. So much about our physiology is attuned to being in that environment. You're right. It's like people start to revert to type, but it takes time. You can't do that in one afternoon. You can't allow that confidence to build just over 2 weeks or something. It does take time, because if you arrive somewhere and go, whoa, the ground's not normal. Like, how do I handle this? That takes time in order to, I was going to say to rebalance, but it is literally and figuratively rebalancing yourself for that environment.
Yeah. And that's, I guess that brings me back to another point that you've made about how forest schools is a thing now, and people are qualified forest school leaders. Forest school leaders are trained not just to play games outdoors or just to be able to light fires but in a whole range of social and emotional and practical skills and areas that enable them to hold space and create the learning opportunities that are needed to open up those core needs that children have, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think it's really good to recognise the level of attention that forest school practitioners have paid to all of those things. But that's also not to dismiss the idea that parents and teachers and anybody who is with children, and in fact, right, even if you're not with children, if you're with yourself, just, the value of taking yourself out there and finding those things and, testing what you can do and what there is around you. I think, and I'm really noticing at the moment the number of people who are becoming more aware of what's around them, because actually as your other stimulus gets shut off, so you don't have the same social circle that maybe you did, or the same schedule of things that you have to do each day. What do you do instead? Well, you start to pay attention, right? Because you've got to do something. We are creatures that seek input. So, and the number of people who've been sending me pictures of things, going, "What's this? I've seen this in my garden. It's never been there before," and it probably has, but you maybe just haven't noticed it yet. So it is really interesting to see that level of attention that everybody can pay, and the benefits of that are huge, aren't they?
Yeah. Let's talk about the benefits of nature connection, because I think sometimes when you're in the circle of people who are working as nature connectors, whether that's forest school or otherwise, or just people who are very passionate about it and do spend a lot of their time outdoors, sometimes, for example, when I go to London and I go, there's millions of people who clearly don't think about this every day. There's the swathes of society that have so many other things that are important to them that actually nature isn't at the forefront of their minds. So yeah, I like to sort of remind myself of that and get out of my bubble and go back to what it is about nature that's so beneficial. How are you resourcing yourself from nature right now?
Well, I was just thinking about what you were saying about the about that sort of who's disconnected. I was just thinking about a friend of mine, Elspeth, who's been an outdoor activity instructor for years, and she said, always remember we're the junkies. We're already hooked on this. We already see the way that it feeds us, and that for most people, it's quite weird and a bit alien, and we should never assume this is normal, right? And I think it is really, really good to remember, because, like you say, when you're in your own bubble, you kind of think it's completely normal to just, climb out the window and wander barefoot, or whatever it is that you're drawn to do at the moment. But actually, for a lot of people, that's so filled with, almost like a sense of judgment, like or fear or anxiety, and that's also a way we connect with nature, right? That's the other thing that our bodies are attuned to do is to feel those things. But when it gets displaced, that's quite overwhelming, isn't it? So for me, I feel very I was going to say lucky, but it's not that, because I know that I've been resourcing myself for years with my connection with nature. Since childhood, it's been the thing that I've done, climbing trees and sort of, poking around the back garden. So it is really normal for me. And so for now, when I'm being tested on other levels, the fact that I can just go, right, I'm just going to walk really slowly and see if I can notice a flower that I didn't notice yesterday. So I've got I moved at the end of last summer to an area where there's a little tiny patch of woodland just outside my window there, and every day, I reckon, I've just walked super slowly around it, because it's only little, so I have to walk really slowly to do a loop. And I've just looked to see if something's come into flower that wasn't in flower yesterday. And I've been trying to record that to see what comes up, kind of really get to know that area. So that's, that sort of requires a level of focus that means that then my brain can't do the flappity flippity, all of the stress stuff that it would possibly do if it was left to its own devices. It's a really find that a really useful way just to kind of soothe and calm. And like I say, all of our nerve endings that really want to take in information like that are attuned to that environment, are all just really going, oh, that's all better. Yes, the fact that our eyes, if we see lots of blue and green, our eyes are physiologically, so like physically, kind of, the cones are set up for that. Like it's not coincidence at all. So the fact that all that information gets taken in, and the stress system just goes, it's amazing. I feel really, really excited to be able to do that as part of my everyday right now.
There's so much, people who do it know it, but there's so much science to back it up, isn't there? So much science to sort of to show and demonstrate the physical and social and emotional benefits of spending time in nature, and the kind of things that those do, that does for you. From when you take your shoes off and touch the earth with your feet, you actually earth. It's an actual which we build up charge, don't we, in our houses?
Electrical interchange.
And so when we physically put our feet on the floor, we earth ourselves and discharge some of that built up excess energy. And when I read that, I was just like, oh, that's of course, but I didn't know that before, and it makes so much sense, and it does feel so good whenever you've walked around barefoot. And sometimes when I can't sleep very well, I go to that as a one of the things that I do to try and help me better, and it seems to work for me. Actually, I find a night when I've not had any sleep, and I'll make a point of just going and taking my shoes off on the grass and just letting myself ground and earth and feel that connection, and invariably it tends to make me feel better and more relaxed and sleep better. And it's just simple things like that just makes such a big difference. And if you don't have that consciousness, and you're not really choosing on a daily basis to find connection to nature in that way, then it can really change the way we live. And that's that can be fine, and there's lots of people who live well in that way, but I really feel that it can boost and enhance life, and for me is like fundamentally necessary for life to actually have that more deeper connection and that more intentional way of being in the outdoors.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because like you, I keep reading the science and going, oh, okay, well then science explains what my body knew already. Excellent. So it's kind of like it's a confirmation bias, obviously. Like I'm already convinced, but then reading that sort of reinforces my own my own sort of value that I place on those things that I do, so that actually then, if I do take time out to go and sit in the same little spot for 20 minutes, the bit of my brain that's going, oh, look at you doing nothing, can just shut up and go away, because I go, it's okay, science, just shh. It's kind of, it's much easier for me to then allow myself to do those things that I already intrinsically value, because there's that extrinsic kind of confirmation of that as well. So I find that, the reading that I've done around that has been very helpful in sort of allowing me to again, interesting choice of words. I was about to say indulge, which sounds so decadent, doesn't it? It's
and permission and indulge. All of those things. Yeah.
But actually, maybe indulge. We should just come on and indulge.
Part of the world around us. I guess in days gone by, we would have. A lot of people would have had wood burning stoves, and we would have relied on having to spend time outside chopping wood, collecting wood, gathering stuff, or we would have been perhaps growing food more and. Or walking places more. Actually, we would have been a lot more connected to the cycles and the seasons and the time of year. Whereas, it's very easy to avoid knowing anything about what's going on outside right now, isn't it? Especially in the winter, but at any time when we're indoors and we're having meetings on Zoom and we're travelling places in the car, and we have heating and we have electric lights, and you can really avoid what the cycles are doing. And then without without the stimulation that comes from the natural cycles and the natural connection that you would have from having to do jobs outside, we do have to create it, and we do have to allow for it in our busy lifestyles and actually see it as something that's vital, I think.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking about what you just described then, because actually I spent most of my late teens to sort of mid-20s living without running water or electricity, so that I had to chop wood, and I didn't have a car either, so I had to chop wood, and I had to walk everywhere, and I had to go to bed because it was dark and I was too tight to burn another candle, because I was like, oh, I've burnt a candle and a half tonight, that's it, I'm going to bed. Like literally that level of awareness was really high. Like I used to get overexcited by electricity because it's like, oh, I could just read for hours and nothing was disappearing. It's amazing. So then, and actually then, at that time, I don't think I ever would talk about being nature connected, or I wouldn't have that real. I didn't have the language of that I now have to describe the benefits of any of that. And actually, the work that I started to do around working in nature came after that. And I wonder if that's a sort of reaction to finding myself then without the thing that just was the thing that sustained me. Because, if you don't go out and chop your wood, you're not sustained. And if you don't, if you don't kind of do the things that you need, if you don't walk down to the farm and get some water, you're not sustained. So all of those things that literally were sustaining me, then I've had to sort of seek in other ways and find ways to replicate that.
And I think that's a little bit about the work that we do as forest school leaders, is that we're sort of creating that again, aren't we? We're creating space in such a risk-averse society, in such a the physical risk has been something that's been really played up over the years, and the dirt and the cleanness that we seem to create around us. And forest school has been like an antidote to that a little bit, and nature connection work is like an antidote to that a little bit. And it's a little bit contrived, because what we're trying to recreate is that experience that you've just described, that you had whenever you were younger, which is just the lived experience of being, connected. And because of the way we now live, it's not just normal and natural. It is, it is inherently, but it doesn't come normal and natural to us because because of all the trappings that we have. And I wonder if this time now, lockdown and the transition or the change that we're in, will bring people more closer to that. Because when we aren't connected to our food, and we're not connected to where our energy comes from, and we're not connected, and we don't know our local environment very well because we drive everywhere and go lots further, we're actually quite fragile. We're actually very dependent on the systems that uphold that way of life. And when those systems break down and those systems aren't there anymore to create this sort of illusionary facade that is normality, what we come back to is nature again, and being outside and thinking about food and where's it going to come from, and what's going to happen when the producers who would normally be producing at this time of year for winter and the winter supplies and can't and aren't doing because of lockdown, and what's going to happen in the future. I mean, I haven't really been following very much of the news at all, if I can help it. But I'm slightly aware that, things like supply chains and in other countries, particularly Africa right now, are being hugely affected, and there are famines and starvation happening because of the lack of supply chains. But we are likely to be impacted by that too, and there'll be things that we can't get hold of in a few months, and really made me feel my own vulnerability and want to find more ways of living more sustainably. actually more
Yeah.
sustainably. Like I'm growing things now, and I'm not under the illusion that I'm going to be able to grow enough food to live and feed my family. But I'm definitely more aware of the importance of local food and how important it is for me that I get outside and just sit on the land and sit under trees and connect to nature.
And alongside that, I've really noticed the rise of people forming networks to support their own community, which I think is really interesting. So, like you say, those vulnerabilities start to get exposed, and our response to that as a society has been to check on our neighbours more, and that is quite interesting, isn't it? Those things that, like you say, we are struggling to maintain with the pace of everything. As soon as you slow everything down and make it all feel a bit more vulnerable, then actually our response is plant vegetables, talk to your neighbours, and go and kind of sit under a tree and try and breathe in slowly. Those things that why do we run to those things? I think is a really good. I mean, I ask it as a question, but I feel like I've got a lot of answers in there as well. Like we're drawn to that stuff, aren't we? It's encoded into us in some way.
And I've heard so many people saying that's what they want to keep. If we ever return to a more, a less lockdown scenario, and can go back to work and things, this slow pace of life, this hands in the earth, feet on the ground, elements of connection to nature and to self and to each other is what we want to keep. And
and so sorry, go on.
No.
Finish.
Yeah, go.
Well, I was just thinking about what's then the role of people who've been cultivating that practice for a while. So about how you've been working on that process for a while and thinking about those things. How then do practitioners respond to that? What can we offer people to support them do that is part of that question. And it feels like I don't know how to prepare for whatever the next stage is. I don't know what to expect, but we've been preparing for it for a really long time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like something will happen, and hopefully we've got all of those resources, those physical, emotional, practical facilitation type resources in order to be able to support whatever that is.
Yeah, because I feel like probably there's going to be a lot of nature connectors listening to this podcast. And initially, when it all happened, Live Wild, the business that I run, had to basically cease. So the things that we love to do, being out in the woods, sharing that space with people, running courses, being in schools, getting children outdoors, training teachers so that they can do that more. Those things are off the cards for us, and that's quite shocking and it's upsetting. I imagine that the people who are resourced to do that training are themselves at this moment nurturing their connection, and I hope so anyway, that making the most of the time to do what we know, and that is get outside and listen and pay attention and nurture and nourish ourselves so that when the time comes. But what else could we be doing? I'm sort of curious.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking that phrase of physician heal thyself. It's like, actually, come on, do what you taught. Walk the walk. And I think that is crucial, isn't it? To not kind of not get distracted into I should be putting everything I do online, or which I really feel that I've kind of had more online meetings and created more online resources in the last 2 months than I have in the last 20 years. But at the same time, I think that is also part of the need to connect still. I think that's important, but also this sort of awareness of, how do we do the work that we know is valued and valuable when we can't do it in the way that comes naturally as well. So this is something that and I don't have the answer to this for sure, because I still can't picture myself facilitating in the way that I facilitate in the current, right now, climate. That's going to change, I know that, but I'm still sort of trying to make that leap in my brain, and sort of thinking about how I can work with other people who have the same questions to actually just do it as well, and try it and experiment and test and play with it and see what happens and see what works as well. And I think that's going to be important, isn't it? Sort of those practitioner networks of kind of testing ideas with each other.
And that's, I think when you're someone who has spent a lot of time in nature and you love, I love the work that I do in nature, and I know quite a few people who've done the trainings that you've done, Lily, and who've it's absolutely changed their lives, because the space you hold is so connective and in beautiful places. Like we've said before, nature does the work, but also there is real meaning and purpose behind learning how to do nature connection, relearning how to do it for ourselves and families, but also then how to share that with people in a way that actually impacts lives in such a powerful way. So we can't do that the way we know, but it is also possible to hold very connective spaces online or provide ways for people now who are seeking to do more connection-based work for themselves and their children, and do that for people, with people, by creating these sort of hubs and online communities and reaching out to the people who might have come. And that's I'm quite excited about what will come out of that, really developing the potential of that. We're finding for our women's group that more people are coming, and the singing online groups, more people are coming than those who would turn up in the woods, because of course you don't have to go anywhere, and that's the biggest barrier, is getting people to these places. So if we can if we can do some of the connection stuff together and then inspire each other to go off and do the solo nature connection work or the small group and family nature connection work and then share it, we may be impacting more people. We may actually have the opportunity in all of this to impact and bring what is so important to more people, and find that creativity.
That's really interesting, isn't it? That being able to start with where people are at is always so key, right? Wherever people are now is where you need to start, and for some people, leaving their homes and going to a woodland isn't where they're at. So actually what you're saying there is that you're doing an online group, so people are turning up because I'm in my home and that's where I'm at, and then hopefully over time, and in the future when you can meet together in the woods, like, oh well, I know those people, I feel okay going with those people, and that again, it's all about the value of connection. So looking for those different ways to establish those links as well, isn't it? I do my own training work through my company Kindling, but I'm also part of a collective of practitioners called Stomping Ground that works with communities and folk locally. And we had a Stomping Ground meeting maybe Friday, maybe last week sometime, and the post-it notes that we came up with are still stuck to all over my computer, because it was like, yes, that's the important stuff. And one of them is just says acts of connection. Like, how can we create those? What are the acts of connection? So we're planning our first Zoom meetup for families that should have been meeting. They should have been meeting this week, but we've put it off for a week while we work out the technology, because that's new for us doing that sort of stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how that maintains that community and maintains that sense of a group that get to see each other. And for some of the families who live near the woods, they've been going to the wood, and the children have been saying, where's everybody else? Like, where is everybody? And sort of, so we need to find ways of doing that. Where is everybody else? And finding ways to connect with people there as well.
Yeah, I have experienced quite a few various and different types of Zoom meetings with children, and with my own children, and family members, and all with varying levels of success. And connection, because obviously for children their levels of attention are limited and you have to really engage them, and to be in an online Zoom room with quite a few people can be quite chaotic. And so that inspired me to do an episode actually of the podcast, which is about how to create and hold connective spaces online. For that reason, because I just got sick of turning up and everyone just going rah, 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 rah. And then there are people who sit there in the corner and don't say anything for the whole time, and others who, try and speak. And it got me thinking about what we do when we're in the woods, and, when we're with children, when we're doing forest school, whether we're doing other types of nature connection or holding space in any way. And all of those things still apply. We need to have beginnings and endings. We need to have guidance in how to listen. We need to be able to give everybody opportunity to speak at least once. And, and there are other things that create the magic that is a good connective space. And when we're outdoors, we do that intentionally as facilitators and as leaders and as space holders. And I think it, invariably it doesn't change whenever you're holding space online. So, I was quite excited to do that, really, because it feels like I've got opportunities to do that kind of connection, but to do it in a way that doesn't put us off doing it again, I think would be great.
That is so true, right? Yeah, that is the key. Yeah. My husband's pretty scarred by Zoom. And just won't now.
No,
he just won't.
Absolutely. And then I get it. I totally get it. It's also I've also heard stories from people who are like, I would have never gone to a men's group, or I would have never gone to and done mindfulness, but because I can do it in my own home, I am doing it, and it's changing my life. And it's that permaculture thing. The problem is the solution, and what can we do to see the gifts in this scenario, and then create connective experiences, and then bring them back into whatever the next normality is.
That meeting people where they are now, and then going on with them from that place. That's the key, isn't it? And this is a good reminder that there's a load of people that aren't where we're at. Loads of them. And we know about that all the time, but actually when you're really busy and there's loads of work coming in, it feels like there are loads of people who are where I'm at. And actually when, like pretty much over a weekend, I watched my diary just go down the plug hole, and I was like, okay, exactly like you were saying, I had to grieve that a little while. I was like, that's all gone. And then, but actually it's a good opportunity to pay attention to what's going on when you're not focused on what's coming next and what am I meant to be doing and where am I at 9:30 and how am I, all of those.
And I think you can get lost in that, can't you?
Yeah.
You can, like as even running nature connection programs and events, you still get caught up in the same way as anybody else does in marketing and communicating and meeting and planning and all of that stuff. Numbers and money and finances, and they're really distracting. And I've seen it a lot in other nature connectors, and I'm sure that it's the same in the field of the arts and music. And people really want to be just making music, and they really want to be just making art, and they really want to just be out in the woods. And in fact, we are all caught up in all of these other things. So, what is it that we can learn in this time that helps us to do what we want to do and not get caught up in all of that? That was what Live Wild evolved to become, to try to become a platform for other nature connectors, so that people didn't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, and they don't have to learn how to set up websites and learn how to sort of get people onto their mailing list and everything, and that we could do that. And hopefully we'll be that again at some point. But at the moment, it feels like just being is enough. Is there
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that. Yeah. And actually for people who are really, my husband's a really amazing crafts person, but doesn't do any of the marketing, communication, meetings, planning. You know, that just isn't him. And so has now started working for somebody else where he can just focus on the craft. And it's also recognizing, you know, what's your niche as well, and where are your gifts best placed as well, and making, like using communities of practice as well. So like you're talking about with Live Wild, so that for people who don't like doing all of those things and can't face the admin, I've got an opportunity. Yeah, because people often, when I'm out in the woods dossing about and looking like it's all a lovely time, go, "Oh, you must have the best job ever." And it's like, well, yes, I do, but there is admin. Like,
yeah,
it's like there is that.
It definitely is. Yeah, I must say I'm relieved to not have to look and check onto the booking system constantly to see who's booked on and how many people we've got. So I'm wondering for all the forest school practitioners out there right now, because there's more to it, isn't there? It's like we can choose to be more present, we can go and do our practices, but there's a financial implication to this, and that when you literally can't afford to pay your bills and you literally can't afford to pay your mortgage because all of your groups that you completely depended upon have been cancelled for the foreseeable future, that's pretty tricky, to say the least. And the worrying thing, as much as I see the opportunity in this, the worrying thing for me is that lots of outdoor education businesses will fold in this, and people will have to let go of that and do other things in order to sustain themselves, which they may then never come back from. And it's like that's the reality for some people that I'm finding difficult. I'm wondering if you've heard from practitioners or nature connectors, or have a sense of what the national position is on, people who are doing nature connection work and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely. I've talked to folk who are finding it really tricky and who maybe don't qualify for other means of support as well right now, and that's quite harsh as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think
because we don't have premises. Sorry, that's it. We don't have business premises, so you don't get that small business loan. And it's like we work in the woods. We don't have premises, and that's one of the key ones, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, or also if you've not been set up for 3 years, that's another thing. So there's a lot of people who fall into that gap. And I think what you were describing, people going away and doing other things, but then critically, the bit you said was about from that, and I think going away and doing other things is not the issue. It's the not coming back. Like, how do we hold on to those people? So again, how do you kind of keep connection with those? The first job that I had, we used to run out of money twice a year, but the funding cycle corresponded with the potato picking cycle. So actually what we did was we like, for quite a few years, like, oh, the money's run out, that's okay, it's October, and we'd go out into the fields and we'd pick potatoes for a few weeks and for a month or so, and then we'd come back, and then in March the money would run out again and we'd grade the potatoes out of the shed. So the going away temporarily wasn't the issue, but I think the big thing is about the not coming back. And we were talking about how being in contact with other people reminds us what our bubble is like. And so if you are, like going and standing in a field picking potatoes with a bunch of folk who've come from all over, or who are local, or whoever, who have really different perspectives to you, I used to love it, because when you stood in a field all day with a bunch of people, you learn a lot about their lives, and that for me is a real really good reminder of what else is going on in the world. But the coming back, so planning the return is really key, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, I as much as I do worry about people, I worry about them and their anxiety more than I worry about them and their ability to come back, because what is going to be more needed when we return to some sort of normal level of moving about in society than connecting with nature and having spaces to do that in a held way, which is what we do as good nature connection practitioners.
And interestingly, in Italy, they're talking about the importance of the outdoor space when children return back to school. That's already quite a big conversation in the UK about how outdoor space is going to be critical to children returning back to school, because physically,
yes,
that you can get more people outside and further apart than you can in a room, like just practically on that level. So there is going to be scope, and as well, people talking about smaller groups of children meeting together. So, like I say, like I can't expect anything, but we can prepare for the fact there's going to be a need there. If we're going to have more children outside in smaller groups, there's got to be something that gives there. There's got to be, I don't know, will there be funding for extra support in schools? Will there be resources put into that? I don't know, but having an eye out on that stuff.
Yeah, imagine if this could be because one of the problems as Nature Connection practitioners that we've had is the fact that most schools are their own businesses now. They're all separate entities. There isn't a one local education authority as such that can say, well, all schools are going to do forest school now. But there may be guidance like that sort of supports Nature Connection and helps raise using the science and the research to show the benefits of getting children outdoors and doing that well in a way that allows them that freedom to move and do all of that physical learning and letting go of difficult emotions that they can do through movement.
Recovery from stress. I mean, absolutely. Like the science says that's where the stress is reduced, and if anything right now, stress is one of the things that's really a big feature of a lot of people's lives. So how can we use that science? So it's definitely sort of conversations we've been having, the Forest School Association, and we've been talking to other charities and organisations that have that as a drive of how can we ensure that that's seen. But it's not as easy as just holding up a big placard and going, this is brilliant. So but looking at what other countries are doing as well, and looking at what the guidance is, I think, we really need to keep an eye out for that stuff.
Are there other countries that are doing things well in terms of outdoor learning and?
Well, so the only thing I was thinking about was what Italy have started to say, and obviously they're ahead of most of Europe in terms of the timeline. And that's something that's coming out of what they're saying. But also just thinking back in our own history, the rise in outdoor schools as a response to the TB epidemics in, 1918, 1920? Somewhere, see, if I was better at history, I would be more confident right now. But so when we've had previous epidemics in the UK, there was then a big push towards open air schools. So the Macmillan sisters set up a lot of outdoor schools in Deptford and in Bradford and places like that, where they were showing that children who were in those environments were thriving and coping better. So again, that might be a history that comes back to us.
Great. Well, let's hope so. So we've meandered through all of the benefits and joys of Nature Connection, and talks a little bit about the risks of and the problems associated with this time. But I'm ending feeling more hopeful and looking forwards, whilst we don't know what is going to happen and have no idea of where we're actually going to end up. We know that Nature Connection is key to life generally, and we've always been banging on about that, but more than ever it feels like it's going to be the way that we can really heal a lot of the trauma and stress and just bring back that connection that we so greatly need as humans. And it's been a good conversation. Thank you, Lily. I'm wondering if people want to get in touch with you or know more about the Forest School Association, or where do they go, and what are you doing right now that people might want to know about, that kind of thing?
So, the Forest School Association, our website, forestschoolassociation.org, it's a membership organisation, and for forest school practitioners, if they're needing access to information, that's a really good place to go for that. And we're trying to pull together guidance to support people as things change as well. My own work, Kindling Play and Training. My website's kindlingplayandtraining.co.uk. In terms of what I'm doing right now that people might be interested in, I've got social media stuff, but it's mostly just like, oh, I saw a bird. Ah, a tree. I've consciously not tried to create a lot of output because actually the cup was pretty empty before I came into this lockdown situation. So actually just sitting around filling up my own cup is what I'm doing right now. So you might get little hints of the drops that are going in, but there's nothing really getting tipped out right now.
Well, that's great modelling though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like you say, you've got to walk the walk as well, haven't you?
Yes.
So yeah, no new things. That's what I'm doing right now.
I love that. I love, because actually, that's it's sometimes we just need to stop, don't we? And take stock and listen and grow and into whatever it is that comes next, and then we'll be resourced and ready to fly. Or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or just carry on.
Or just sit around filling up the cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
just get this is it. I found it. I found the solution.
It's as good a model as anything, isn't it, for helping other people see what works well in life. So, yeah.
I don't know how long I can sustain it for financially, but
yeah.
that's the other side of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a lot less admin.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been really nice to chat to you and just connect a little bit more about what feels important to people now, humans now, and all beings, actually. We'll all be benefiting from this time and more connection to nature.
And thanks for the invitation, actually, because it's helped me think about some of the stuff that's going on for me right now and what's going on for other people and those that aren't around me as well. So thank you. I really, really benefited from that.
Yeah, no, it feels exciting to me to be able to get this out to people and have an opportunity to just have these discussions openly and hopefully other people being inspired by them too. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope it inspires you to follow your path of deep connection. I love sharing this information so much, and I'll always share any relevant links in my show notes. If you like the show, please consider supporting it at patreon.com/Connection Matters Podcast. This is where you'll find bonus episodes, giveaways, and behind-the-scenes content from me, as well as having my huge heartfelt thanks for any support that you can give me. It really helps with the viability of the show. You can get most of what will be on offer for as little as £3 per month. Please also subscribe on whatever app you use by clicking that little subscribe button below. That way you'll get all of the upcoming episodes straight into your device. And please leave a review on iTunes. It's so helpful to our ratings. The music that opens and closes the show is actually by my very own dad, Ray Johnson. Thanks, Dad. And you can hear more of his music at soundcloud.com/Vision Ray.